and then we can get going. So welcome everybody to an extra bonus session of Environmental Engineering Grad Seminar. If you want continuing education credits for this, just email Dr. Eric Seagren and he can get you a certificate. So today we're honored to have Dr. Jeralee Anderson. She's the president and CEO of co-founder of Greenroads International. She manages daily operation of Greenroads and is charitable programs and executes the goals and policies of the board of directors. She received her doctorate in sustainability and civil engineering from the University of Washington, as well as a certificate in business administration from the Foster School of Business. She worked in a variety of structural, geotechnical, and construction engineering positions after she received her undergraduate engineering degree with a minor in music from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She's a licensed professional engineer in Washington State and California, and currently serves as a volunteer member of both the Sustainability in Transportation and Ecological and Ecology and Transportation Committees to the Transportation Research Board of the National Academy of Science. In 2003, President Barack Obama recognized Dr. Anderson and her domestic and international work at Greenroads Foundation as a champion of change for transportation technology in the 21st century. In her free time, she fosters beagles and is an active volunteer for the Seattle Beagle Rescue. She drinks way too much coffee. Yeah, you'll fit in good here, like most nonprofit directors, and enjoys lifting extremely heavy things for fun and for free time. All right, won't ask you to elaborate on all that, but
quite a bio on that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about sustainable transportation with this class. So I always like to start our presentations with sort of a conversation or a definition of sustainability. And today I'm here to share with you what green transportation might look like. I understand Brian will be taking questions in the chat, and maybe if you have something to please jump in and interrupt me if you've got a burning question. So today what I would love to tell you a little bit about is the organization called Greenroads International, and we'll talk a little bit about who we are and what our mission is. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so we often spend time speaking with university partners and other academic institutions to share information about what's going on in the industry, and we have a lot of opportunities for students and volunteering as well. So please do ask me about that at the end if I forget to make that pitch. I'll tell you a little bit about why green transportation matters and make the case for a rating system in general, like Greenroads. We'll tell you a little bit about the rating system itself. And of course, I've got some really great examples of projects. Whenever I do presentations all around the world, I do try to tailor the presentation. So I've got some that are local in the Midwest to share with you today. So hopefully we'll get some time to talk a little bit more about those. Nothing specific in Michigan quite yet. So there's still a first to be had in the state of Michigan. And I'll tell you a little bit about how the process works, but we'll go a little high level. And then if we have time, tell you some of the key messages that might help with starting your very first project. I like to open my conversations with a Dilbert comic. I have my trusty Dilbert with me. It's interesting being in these new virtual environments now. I've got all my props with me at my desk. So Dilbert, this is something my dad gave me. I found the audience that we work with is typically engineers and construction managers, and Dilbert cartoon is one that resonates really well. And there's one of my very favorite comics which talks about the sustainability director at a brand new company, or Dilbert's new company. And it turns out where this is going is actually the creator of Dilbert, Scott Adams, has a relatively straightforward and easy to understand definition of sustainability. And he says, I think of it as living the life you want with as much earthwise efficiency as your time and money will reasonably allow. And what you'll find when we talk about Greenroads today and understanding the tool of the rating system and what it can do for you, we actually spent a lot of time designing it so that it can be useful to you as an engineer when you go out into practice or when you're working with your construction team. And it's a great, easy way to understand and make sure that message is communicated consistently throughout the whole team. And you need something that's easy to understand. It's not squishy. I'm an engineer. I need something that I can understand what it means in very practical definition. So that's where we get started. Definition of sustainability. I'm sure everybody here is sort of preaching to the choir to a certain extent. And so the big story of why green transportation matters is that business as usual, we sort of just started to tell that it's not really cutting it anymore. And this is one of my very favorite pictures from the Japanese earthquake in 2011, which gives a really good image of what it feels like in infrastructure here in the United States and also around the world. Everything's split down the middle. We don't seem to have enough money to solve all these problems, and they're just compounding and compounding. Plus climate change and this idea of dramatically changing weather events and flooding has a huge impact on our transportation systems. And truth be told, we've been talking about sustainability in transportation sector for more than a decade. So even before Greenroads started in 2006, which was initially the idea of sustainable transportation, we've been trying to solve this problem for a really long time in understanding how transportation as a sector and the design and construction of projects actually has a dramatic effect on all of these elements of sustainability. It turns out also we spend a lot of our money or your money in your tax dollars go to transportation projects. So once we collect that, the government will collect the tax money and then they'll put it right back into the ground. And it turns out that a good portion of that, upwards of over $130 billion, is being spent on transportation in general. So highways and streets being the largest component of that. But actually what's really surprising and sort of tie back to sustainability in general is that pavement is somewhere between 67 to 75% of that annual spend of our tax money in the transportation sector. So it's actually in the materials, and that's where we actually see the biggest bang for the buck. I know a lot of agencies around the world are doing more things with recycled materials and materials in general. But just come back to that idea, your tax dollar that we're spending on transportation, about 70% of that is what we're buying and the ingredients of the road itself. So 70% is a pretty large chunk. It turns out that the infrastructure footprint itself beyond cars, so back to that materials footprint, it's a very small component compared to tailpipe emissions, but there's much more to roads than the tailpipes and emissions themselves. So there's a lot of things we can do as an engineer to help corral users to shifting modes and all of those things, all of which are part of Greenroads. But actually the pavement itself and the construction of those roads uses as much energy to build for one lane that is 1 mile long as 100 average American households use in a year. And so my big question to you is, if you weren't sitting at home, which is most likely today, how many households did you travel to school or to work on the day-to-day? And it's a pretty large footprint when it comes to thinking about our infrastructure in terms of energy use, just from what we're putting in the road itself. So we started this idea of Greenroads actually at the University of Washington. A woman named Martina Soderlund was a graduate scholar coming over from Sweden, who actually started her career in the urban planning and environmental design department and somehow became a refugee from that program and wandered her way over into the University of Washington Civil and Heavy Construction program and started with this idea and having a background in lighting and acoustics. She was very experienced with the LEED green building rating system and wanted to do something to get her master's thesis and be done. So her original work was actually unfunded. And she started with the research question of, if green buildings, why not green roads? So in 2006 was when this whole story started. I came into the program in about 2008. And early on, we had a lot of interesting collaborative ideas. A lot of her original work for Martina is actually still within the rating system itself. But what we did is spent over $500,000 in research funding to develop this tool called Greenroads Rating System. So something similar for the transportation sector, like the vertical construction rating system called LEED and all of its components. There are other rating systems, of course, now, but in the early years, this is where it's at. So early on, we had a lot of industry, DOT research support. A couple notables locally here in Michigan for you would be the State Pavement Technology Consortium, which does include Minnesota DOT. So I've got, we did a pilot project with them early on, and also Federal Highway Administration, of course. So 5 years, over 20,000 person hours to develop the original rating system tool. Since then, we've had probably twice as many hours go into the existing tool, which is in version 3 now. But the original version took quite a bit of time to develop and was launched in 2011. We also, what makes it unique is it was calibrated on road projects and street projects all over the world. So it's been tested. We know that it works and it fits for purpose of surface transportation projects. So in 2010, we got the crazy idea to start a nonprofit organization to sort of care for the tool and build a network of folks that can rally around the mission of benefiting communities and the environment so that we can help future generations of people do this more often. And so we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. That was a photo of us when we were last able to meet all at one point in our annual meeting in April 2019. So it's been a while and probably will be a little bit longer given that we're in a global pandemic right now. So this is sort of the network of Greenroads currently to date. It's getting bigger every day, which is great to see. So almost 6,000 people around the world and 1,800 organizations are interested in Greenroads. We've got representation all over the world and a really great mix of professionals as well as students and academic institutions. So a very interdisciplinary network. It's a lot of fun. We hope you will join us in this. And so we really appreciate your time today and for listening to me talk. I hope I trigger some interest for you. So our mission in life, or our vision, is to change the way we build transportation projects, as we think we can rethink how we do it. We also are very confident that people like you have the skills and willingness to learn how to do that on your, as soon as you set foot in your day job eventually, or if you have one today. So meanwhile, the technology is changing the world. And so we know that we're headed in this direction, and the next step or that barrier is just getting a little bit beyond that business as usual. So here at Greenroads, our motto is 1 mile at a time. We know that it's not going to be a night and day change or overnight change, but we know that that message has to be there, and the time is pretty much right. So our mission in general, we are a mission-focused organization. We have a certification program as well as a education program, of which you are participating in today. So thank you for that. We also have a membership program that's available and are generally considered a charitable organization as a 501c3. So let's look at a general example. You might be thinking, what does a green road look like? So, and what does that actually mean? And one of the things a rating system tool can do is it can help identify features of what would be a normal project, or understanding, even if you looked at a conventional project, like the street outside of your house, we can see things that could be improved upon or slightly changed so that it might be more sustainable in the long term. And that the evidence does show some of these practices, if they're used, and the research evidence shows that these things can save money, they can actually improve the environment, and also help people and improve access and usability. So it's a couple of examples. So for example, on this project, you may see in the pavement itself, perhaps they've used recycled content in the cement pavement, and it results in not only a higher quality pavement that lasts a longer time, but it offsets emissions from the production of cement. Perhaps it's less expensive because that recycled content was less costly than the cement itself. So those are just a couple of examples that you can go and point to, or wonder if they're there, that you may not be able to, as a user, you may be taking for granted because you don't know it's there. So if we're not communicating it, we're not hearing about it. Perhaps you're walking on a sidewalk. Everybody's been on a sidewalk or the absence of a sidewalk and perhaps felt unsafe while they were walking. So improving safety on the site, which includes also during construction, making it more accessible and walkable for people or bicycles, are another key element of a green roads project. Perhaps even just sitting in traffic less is better for everyone, and less time in traffic is something everybody wants. Reduces emissions as well. So making it a higher performing roadway or street for purposes of users in general. And then also on the environmental side, all of these items do have some sort of environmental benefit, but some of the ones that are really easy to point out or name while you're walking down the street, maybe they use native plants or vegetation and tried to restore sort of that urban environment into a more natural environment. Maybe they're using irrigation systems that are more water efficient, so a drip irrigation system versus a different type of irrigation system that's less efficient. So understanding you can measure all of these things and you can actually go point out those things or see them on a project is really important, being able to share this message of sustainability. And if you're not measuring, really you're just talking about it. And so if you don't see and understand what that actual outcome is, it's really impossible to talk about it. So a rating system tool can help with that. So Greenroads itself, again, a rating system is essentially a collection of best practices that are for many different things that are characteristics of sustainability, all grouped into one. And so it helps us understand how to quantify or measure and manage sustainability on a project, and importantly, how to communicate those things to other people who might be involved, and most importantly, to the general public. The rating system itself for Greenroads is similar to the LEED rating system for buildings. And when we say that, we actually mean the submittal process and the journey that you're on when you're thinking about sustainability. It's not an awards program, it's actually a process. So you have to prepare documents and submit them. And it's essentially audited by an outside third party that is providing that additional value for what it is going through that process. Greenroads can do a lot of things in terms of a rating system in general, not the organization necessarily, but a rating system tool can help us understand what it is you're doing on sustainability. We see it often used by agencies to understand and sort of measure where they are today and think about what those goals, where they would like to be in the future. So for strategic programming, you start with a benchmark and measuring where you are, and then saying, okay, well, these are some things that are opportunities. Also, I think in the past 10 years, thinking about Greenroads, the interesting piece or the humbling piece about it is to think about how a rating system tool specific to transportation can actually help build a market where there isn't one, for products and services and technologies that are currently not existing, and an opportunity for innovation in the market. So overall, there are a lot of rating system tools to choose from, and all of them really try to focus on this idea of improving transportation sustainability. There are a lot of reasons to do it. You can measure how quiet or how loud and safe a road is. You can see how long it lasts. You can understand if people can use it effectively. And of course, if you can measure those environmental impacts, you can definitely tell a story about environmental sustainability that we're really not talking about enough right now. Overall, being verified gives a lot of added value and something to hang your hat on at the end of that journey. I do want to point out that currently Greenroads is focused on project development through construction of the project. And it's a project-oriented rating system, and we did that on purpose. One of the most common questions we have is, isn't a road that never gets built the most sustainable road? And while that may be true, it is not possible to rate nothing. So we actually do require, we start with the question of, so you're going to build a road, and you're thinking about that word sustainability, then that's when that trigger should go off and say, okay, it's time to start thinking about certifying this project and making sure that we could show, walk the talk and show that we actually did something. So planning and operations are a really huge part of how a project itself functions within a network. And so those pieces are actually part of the rating system as well. They definitely influence the activities, but it is focused primarily on practices for early planning and project development, all the way through construction activities. So version 3, which we'll get to in a minute here, is actually a little bit more advanced and full life cycle impacted. So another common question, does Greenroads work for my project? Of course it does, as long as it's a surface transportation project. So bridges, streets, highways, rails, trails, and more. runways as well, as long as it's transportation related. There are some minimum criteria we have to qualify for participating in the rating program, but in general, a rating system tool can be used. You could actually use the lead rating system tool on a road project. That's how we found out that we needed a road-based or a transportation-based rating system, because it turns out you can use a tool, but it may not be the right one. So rating systems in general, for green roads, we focus on surface transportation very specifically. The scope of the work does matter a little bit. However, it fits for maintenance types of projects as well as reconstruction and new projects. And our largest project to date is over $1 billion, and our smallest is less than $200,000 US. So understanding that, and it is currently a one-size-fits-all rating system, and it doesn't mean that it will be forever, but right now we know that it does work for transportation projects of all kinds. There are many different types of rating system tools that are available. Here are some things and reasons why Greenroads is great, and we are rating system developers at Greenroads International, so we are very concerned about the quality of the tool itself and how it is built. So there's some really cool things to think about when you're thinking about choosing a rating system or why you might want to choose a rating system. The important ones that most people will really appreciate are that it is a transportation-focused rating system. So if you're working on a transportation project, you probably want to use a tool that's fit for purpose. It's going to be able to recognize the things that you're doing better than you have yourself in the past, or better than your neighboring community might be doing right now. So those are really the key messages. On the other hand, there are some other tools that are available. Most of the other transport related tools are actually derivations of Greenroads. So you will see something like the Federal Highway Administration's Invest Rating System tool was developed also by Greenroads developers. So you'll see a lot of DNA in those tools from early versions of Greenroads, which means that those agencies are primed to be successful at certification should they choose to opt into the program. There's another kind of tool, a couple other kinds of tools to be aware of in terms of environmental or sustainability-based rating system tools. So there's an infrastructure-centric, and that means you can rate a hydro power plant on the same scale as a transportation project. We think that's a little weird. These site tools, so something like this, lead site tools, which would be things like parks and recreation facilities, and transportation tools, which are usually self-assessment tools. And then another kind of an organizational assessment for like an operations maintenance would be things like your ISO standards, your environmental management systems, or quality management systems, which are audits of the agency's practices or the organization's practices itself. So a lot of those things and other rating system tools have influenced the content of Greenroads as well, especially as relates to transportation. So a lot of shared knowledge in this sector, but in general, Greenroads really focuses on building a really great product to use. So as of September 2020, we've got 60 projects certified, over 130 are registered, and that comes out to be about $33 billion. We do have a credential exam called the Level 1 Sustainable Transportation Professional Credential. So 355 folks have successfully passed that. If you're interested in working on a Greenroads project, this is a way that you can help lead and champion those things on your own. There are other levels of that credential as well that add to levels of project management and understanding of the rating system tool itself to become more of an expert in this area. Definitely love the idea that I can still say we're the #1 most used transportation rating system in the world, and I'll continue to say that until I find out that is otherwise known. So if you're looking for a rating system for transportation, we hope to be the one that you end up selecting. So at the end of the day, what does that actually mean? What are the outcomes that we're seeing of people using this tool that are measurable? So as a rating system, we can actually understand and collect this data, which from an academic perspective, I am a recovering PhD student myself. So understanding and graduate, there's research to be done in this area. There's quite a bit of new opportunities to learn, and some of the initial work is on collecting the information from these projects. Process of collection also varies quite dramatically across the ways, but understanding that we can see what the impact of the tool has been so far on our existing portfolio. So a couple of things just to highlight on this would be 55 miles of bike lanes have been certified. And I believe this is a little out of date. This doesn't include all 60 of those projects at this point. But one thing that's interesting on this, you'd expect green roads to be safer. And in general, we actually haven't found teams reporting safety improvements, which is very unusual to us. So actually this 21% crash reduction is actually from a project that's in Ohio. That was a safety focused project using the AASHTO Highway Safety Manual. So they had the data to back it up, but everybody else seems to be saying that they're doing road safety and actually not producing any performance measures for that. So that's pretty interesting. Similarly, work zone safety is another issue that's really, really critical, of course, for both human health and safety, but also for costs. And we are surprised to find that most teams do not have a work zone site safety plan in place. So for Greenroads, our opportunity is to specify that teams should have one of these things, and we include those in the rating system and incentivize that practice so that we see it more frequently on the Greenroads projects. And in fact, it is now a project requirement to have a work zone safety plan.
Can you take, sorry, can you pause 1 second for a chat question?
Yeah.
Can you read the chat there, or should I read it out?
I cannot see it.
Okay, I'll read it out. Or the person, Chaitanya, do you want to ask it? You can ask it.
Hi, Jeralee. So I had a question as in how is Greenroads than Invest by Federal Highways or Envision, which is for general infrastructure? And in the presence of multiple rating systems, how would a user, like a state DOT, a decision maker, choose between one rating system?
Oh, that's a great question. So how do you know which one to use, right? So and that's and did I interpret that question correctly? So how do you choose?
Yes.
When you have choices to make. So you do the one that you want or your community wants, right? So either you have expertise in that particular rating system. You can often look at the type of project it is and see maybe where you have opportunities to succeed. If you have policymakers involved, they're going to have an opinion on that, as well as your local community. So in general, a rating system tool helps you tell the story that you wish to tell about your achievements for sustainability. So for Greenroads, we know that there's other tools available for that. If you're choosing road related or transportation related tools, we're pretty familiar with the ones that are there for transportation. And the main difference between the two is whether or not you want something that you're saying you're rating yourself, or if you want a third party providing that outside credibility to your project. So that's the value add for a third party rating system. When it comes to choosing between third party rating systems, which is like an Envision or infrastructure related tool, which applies worldwide, you can look at Greenroads or other types we have a Green Rails program as well. So if you have a specific type of project that might fit better with one of those two rating systems, then it would be on you to understand the difference and be able to explain what those tools could offer to the project. My understanding of the infrastructure-based tools they're very process-oriented and very focused on initial design. Greenroads itself focuses a lot on the construction side. At least it's very balanced. It's about half and half design and construction. You can't get certified without the construction piece, and it's not a gentleman's agreement to do that work. So understanding that, the process of certification is quite different for both types of tools, and being willing to commit to participating in the program and getting that learning out of it at the end, since it is more or less a journey to understand how it applies to a project. I'm sure that I don't personally have experience working on Envision projects, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But understanding that Greenroads specifically is, it's a full interdisciplinary team, and it does take, success to get through the whole thing, and communication, and there's a little bit more project management on the Greenroads side. So hopefully that gives you a good, I can give you some more pitches if you need somebody trying to understand, if you're trying to work on a project. And we get into this point, and this is sort of a side commentary, but we can overanalyze the tools all the live long day. It's sort of the nature of our profession as engineers to think that this is something that's really important one way or another. There's nothing that says you can't do both. There may be, you know, some logic decisions on whether you want to spend your time to do it, but in general, you know, somebody who gets 2 awards at the end of construction is probably more excited about both of them than they are about having to make that choice early on and you know, regretting it. So I think there's generally, you can do both, and there's it's not necessarily one or the other. And you know, both the tools have value to add to a process. Whether or not you commit to actually certifying, you can still use those rating system tools to make your project better. I hope that helps. That's a really good question though. I like how you asked it. Are there any other ones before I move on?
No more. Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So on the environmental side, a couple other environmental impacts. So measuring what those outcomes are in terms of understanding your environmental footprint for a project. So this is some of our projects have clocked in up to 33% reduction in carbon dioxide, and that's huge. So remember our 100 average American households per lane per mile. This is a big measurable outcome. So if we are moving toward climate-related legislation, carbon taxes, or anything like that, at a government agency, if you're working for an agency or with one and consulting for them, understanding that these things are measurable. We should be doing these things already. The skills, LCA, lifecycle assessment, those probably what you're learning in this class are very valuable to you going out into the profession to apply those skills immediately, since we do know how to do that, and there's a very small group of people who actually help with this. If you're looking for the scores to beat, thinking about how other Greenroads projects have performed, the average recycled content on a Greenroads project is about 25%. So there's your target. If you want to go 30, then you'd be the best in the world at this point. 92.7% diversion of waste materials from landfill. Again, these are a little out of date, so they may not be precise, but it's somewhere upwards of 90%. So it's great to be able to say, as an industry so far, and using the samples, which are self-selected, that we have participating in the program, do end up delivering these kinds of impacts and outcomes on their projects to tell that story of what they're doing for sustainability. On the economic recovery side, we're definitely going to be talking about green recovery and what that looks like. Rating system tools are primed to be able to help with this and say that if you are working on a Greenroads project, in fact, you have a green job. So when it comes to metrics for public agencies, these things are really important. Understanding where those public dollars are being invested is super important. Reinvesting into communities and revitalizing communities. This is a great example of a recovery project, actually from 2008. This is Selwood Bridge Replacement Project. Huge amount of economic investment. We hope will be coming forward in the next couple of years for part of this pandemic recovery as well. But there's also definitely cost savings that can be recognized. I'm not sure if you're looking at life cycle cost analysis in this class, but this is a tool that is available. We've been talking about life cycle cost analysis. And you can't get away from this idea that initial cost is a barrier. If we start thinking about life cycle costs, there's definitely practices in the rating system that can save money up front. Why aren't we doing all of those all the time anyway? And the answer is I don't know, but maybe a rating system tool can help start that conversation. And then of course, we've seen a number of projects that have reaped the benefit of that upfront life cycle cost savings. May cost a little bit more upfront, but overall, the payback is 19%, up to 19% savings on maintenance. Much of that are related to pavement and construction materials, alternative delivery, accelerated construction, and much more. So let me tell you a little bit about the rating system itself. So how do you get started with this tool? There's a version 3 is actually currently just closing. We extended the deadline until Friday this week. So if you have some comments on the rating system, it's currently available for free online. So you can log in and post comments, poke around in there and see what it's like. And this is the updated version. We publish a new version of the rating system about every 5 years, 3 to 5 years, depending on how effective the tool is, if it's delivering the results we want to see. So it's a continuously evolving standard. The rating system is available for version 2 in PDF, and that's a picture of the front cover. The other item that you need to do a project is actually the rules of the program, which are in a book called the Rating Handbook. It explains the process and details about how to go about getting your project certified. So the rating system has some of that and some good examples, as well as the text of the credit and the instructions of what you need to do. I'll show you that here in a second, but that rating handbook will definitely give you all the details on how to set your project up for success. So in Greenroads version 3, which is open for available for registration, we still have 12 project requirements, which are the minimum baseline to be considered a sustainable transportation project. And that's what the research shows. So those are 12 things that you need to do. Definitely check them off the list. And a good way to understand them is you're probably doing them already. And it may not be formally documented, but you're probably doing them already, at least here in the United States. Especially if it's a major project, federally funded one, most likely to be well suited to do most of these things. The core credits are voluntary. So from a suite of what is 60 different activities that can be chosen. I apologize in advance for the dog that will be barking in the background very shortly. That's Ranger, by the way. So the core credits have 1 to 5 points based on research and life cycle assessment data that we understand will help move the needle forward on sustainability. And you can pick and choose from any of those things. Actually, there's 55 credits in the core credit categories, and there's 5 in this extra credit category called creativity and effort. What you'll find with the core credits is that it's most likely to be directed at a particular type of professional who's most likely to be documenting those things as they go through a design and construction project. So at the end of the day, up to 150 points are available. Let me give you some examples here. So if you're a stormwater professional, you're probably going to be focused on your environment water category, or a design professional in general, it will be mostly working with those first 3 categories on the transportation, environmental planning, transportation planning. And if you're a contractor or construction, or maybe working with the agency in administering the project, procurement and delivery is a brand new category. Materials and production and construction activities is sort of the meat of the projects. And when we actually start making that environmental impact is when that first shovel breaks ground on a construction project. The process for rating actually is stepwise. So the first thing to do on a Greenroads project is to get an application submitted, which is free. And then any project gets screened, and we will not tell you to proceed with certification if we don't think you're going to make it. So just make sure you understand that you can trust us to tell you if we think it's a good candidate or not. And if so, and you're interested, then we'll ask that you'll register the project, which provides access to the website where you'll be documenting the work that you're doing. And we have 3 different ratings now for different stages of projects. We started this early in 2019 as a result of working with some really long-term transportation projects, which are upwards of 7 to 10 years for development, as well as through execution and construction on some of these giant projects. So an alignment rating would be something like the more planning related phase when you're doing your environmental impact statement. Shovel ready rating means you're probably 90 to 100% design, and a work zone rating, which is actually specifically focused on contractors and construction. And then if you put all 3 of those together, or put only 2 of those together, it's likely that your project will be positioned to certify at the end of construction. A lot of other steps related to that, but that's generally the steps in the scale over time on what you can expect. So at the end of the day, out of 150 points, you need 50 to get certified, which is about 37% of the rating system. So you need those 12 project requirements, knock those off the list, and then you need to collect 50 points to get to a bronze rating. Currently, there are no gold or evergreen certified projects anywhere in the world. And about, I think, 18 of the projects are silver certified. Most of the teams hit a bronze rating. And much of that is related to not starting early enough to really embed some of these practices into their design and construction documents. So let's take a picture of what it looks like. So this is an older version of the rating system, but this is generally the idea of what a credit will look like. It has a clear title, a code that you can refer to in practice, and a goal that says what you need to do or what you're trying to achieve. And then there's a set of instructions to meet that goal. And so our largest piece of advice is to follow the instructions and do what they say. And then your outcome should be a document that looks like a record or evidence that satisfies the need for certification to compile that with the other credits you're pursuing. So here's an example of a credit that meets PR1 ecological impact analysis. This is a very most important credit in the rating system, and most projects do this already. So here's an example of what that looks like on a major project, which is the SR 520 bridge replacement here in Seattle, Washington. The idea here is that you do this documentation. It's a very comprehensive look at ecological impacts throughout the whole life of a project. And in general, these documents will show that you've done those things and have already prepared a narrative to tell the story of the project. Similarly, you might hire out a communications consulting organization to do what's called participatory planning in version 3, which really involves sort of a comprehensive way to include the community in understanding what involving them early in the design process for decision making on a project. This is also a project requirement. It's something that is part of a NEPA type process or environmental review process, but actually documenting and having a community engagement plan is a really critical piece of this particular process. And not every team has a fully documented process. Also, the project requirements in particular have something for everyone. You can't get certified without your contractor. So the contractor will need to prepare a work zone health and safety plan. This was an interesting credit that actually evolved quite a bit over time. In version 1.5, it was submitted as a custom credit by a project team. In version 2, it became a core credit worth points. And in this next iteration of Greenroads, it is now a project requirement because it is so important to overall safety on the job site. So that's an example here. This is definitely something you need your contractor on board for. And a lot of times in a low bid environment, you'll end up specifying this to be prepared by them if they're not already doing it already. So what you'll learn and see from a lot of the project requirements is it will jump you into these voluntary credits which are worth points. So here's an example. Low impact development is a project requirement. Low impact development stormwater treatment methods can help you earn credit for enhanced treatment by removing dissolved metals from the stormwater that runs onto the site. So you leave your project leaves the world a little cleaner than when the water came to the site, or had a minimal impact mimicking the natural environment. Energy and mobility is a brand new category in Greenroads. So this is an easy example. A lot of agencies now are transitioning to a solid state lighting program, which saves energy during the operations phase of the project. This is a great example of a design choice that has operational impacts for sustainability in general. It's a really straightforward, easy to understand one, and then also a very beautiful glamour shot of porous asphalt pavement. An access and livability category credit. This is a brand new credit for Greenroads called community connectivity, really looking at how to remove barriers to mobility and access within a community and measuring some of those things. One of the major changes for version 3 has been more of a performance-based, and a little bit less prescriptive. So we're not looking whether or not you have a sidewalk, we're actually looking at what that sidewalk helps achieve as a performance goal. For usability. So this is something that's new. This is one of our projects in Seattle here that is actually quite a bit, has the most modes I've ever seen on a project in one place. So 5 modes in one area. Pretty cool. On the procurement and delivery side, here's a great example of local jobs and 3 STPs certified and working on a construction site in New Zealand. Basically focused on job development and local job and workforce development is a big piece of Greenroads version 3 and specifically for economic recovery. Also, I'll highlight Mark, who is a sustainable transportation professional. You can get points on your project for actually having your STP credential. A resource tracking is a brand new one as well. It's actually a new credit that was revised. We discovered working with project teams that they had no incentive to actually document the materials that they were using on a project site. So we actually created a new credit that provides points for doing so in version 3 to help teams hopefully get set up with some sort of a document control system to look at both water resource management and also materials management throughout the scope of construction. So this is an example of how you might do that for water on a project. And finally, in construction activities, You'll have accelerated construction as a option. So we're measuring how much faster that you actually built the project and what time you might have saved from doing that. It will help reduce work zone emissions related to construction and user costs as well. And finally, one of my favorite stories, I actually have my sample of Pottycrete right here. This is actually a great example of an outcome of a Greenroads project. That's a great story to tell for all the live long day. This is the city of Bellingham, Washington got a phone call at the Public Works Department from a local housing authority that said, we're tearing down a building and we have 400 toilets that we do not want to throw into the landfill. Hey, Public Works professional, can you help us out? And so the guy on the other end, Freeman Anthony, said, sure, we'll try it out. They worked with their construction contractor and crushed up those toilets as a concrete aggregate replacement and porcelain aggregate, I'm sorry, and put that in to concrete tests with about a 20% ratio and ended up making and dubbing it Pottycrete. So overall, this project in general had a recycled asphalt pavement. They also used recycled concrete in the base materials and had a 33% recycled content, which again is only 67 households per lane per mile and not 100 as normal. So it ended up reducing the life cycle footprint substantially, and also nothing better than the commemorative toilet seat in that sidewalk, which still lives to tell the tale. All right, I know I have a little, I'm a little bit over time as what Brian asked me about, but I would love to share some projects if I still have some time. So I did want to check on my time here.
Well, let's just take 1 minute. We're almost out of time. Does anyone have a question or comment for Jeralee? And then those who have to go can go, and then she can continue on for those who want to stay. Any questions or comments at this point? I don't hear any right now, Jeralee, so go ahead. People may have to leave, but
Okay.
Some of us will stay, so go ahead, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, okay, so here's the Pottycrete project, what they ended up doing. So City of Bellingham story, actually, they started with a pilot project to try out the rating system. And what you can see with a rating system is you can see using the same system, you can compare projects to one another. So in the City of Bellingham, they did a pilot project with version 1.5. And the way that happened was they came to us with a set of plans and specifications and said, I think this is a sustainable project. What do you think? And so we scored it. It was actually not intended to pursue certification. So they ended up with about 29 points. I'll mention that this is an older version of the rating system, and all the scorecards I have right now are from version 1.5 or version 2. So for project requirements, they didn't quite meet the mark, but they didn't intend to do that. So they took what they learned on a pilot project and then they applied it to this project, which is about half the budget. It's a little less than $1 million, a trail improvement gap completion project with now a sidewalk made with 80 tons of recycled toilets. So, and the first silver certification in the world, first project certified in the world and silver certified to boot. So they actually increased their net number of points by 15, really focused on recycled materials and content. And it wasn't difficult for them to do this. They integrated it into the project specifications. And then they also had a few new environmental items like permeable pavers for parking spots, as well as stormwater management, since it was funded through the ecology department. So a lot of really cool stuff there. Currently, just in sort of the number to beat, this is currently our highest ranking project in the world is a silver certified East 40th Street Green Infrastructure Improvements project. So the highest score currently is 54 points. No projects has scored higher than that. And just remember, we've upped the ante with version 3 as well. So you need 50 to get bronze in version 3. In version 2, it was 40. And version 1.5, it was 32 for bronze. So we keep moving those goalposts to keep the industry innovating as we go. So this is a great project. A lot of cool stories. We invite you to come out to our website and check out the details on this one. Recently featured in Asphalt Pro, but you can see some of the porous concrete as well as the permeable asphalt in this photo here through the sky. For major projects, this is also an interesting one thing. Can you certify a highway to be green? And the answer is yes. So this is an interesting one. This one was at over $1 billion in a very complicated construction contract. There was 8 separate contracts that were let by Caltrans on this project. the first 4 were phase 1 and the second 4 were phase 2. And the phase 2 was a public-private partnership that kind of encompassed all of them. So we approach these certifications programmatically, and we break them down into smaller segments that can each be rated separately, especially if they're handled by a separate contractor and a different team. So understanding that what we're rating and defining what you're rating is really important up front. We do provide some of that assistance up front to make sure we understand what the scope of what we're certifying is and help the teams get set up to go. In this photo here, you can see the completed phase 1 on the left-hand side. There's 3 projects that were rated in that, which is the cut and cover tunnel in the front, the battery tunnel, the nice white piece of concrete going up toward the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the southbound high viaduct replacement, and then something a little different, which is the Ruckman Bridge replacement off to the left-hand side of the screen as well. So 3 separate rated projects. We average the scores and call it a composite rating. Overall, this program had a bronze rating for all of the sections that were certified. Something that's close, a little closer to the East Coast, at least on East Coast time, is Raleigh, North Carolina. That was the reigning champion until Tacoma got certified last year. So this one held the title for a couple of years as the highest rated project, and then Tacoma broke the record with 3 additional points here. This was a good one, a warm mix asphalt long life pavement project, and also a complete streets project too. So a lot of different initiatives that will help with these teams to achieve the goals that they're looking for. And actually our very first certified version 2 project was out in Ohio, in Fairfield, Ohio, which is a safety related project that knocked it out of the park with safety and showed that they actually will reduce crashes by 21%. Remember that statistic from earlier in the presentation? This is actually one of the first projects we've seen actually show what they meant when they said that it will be safer for them in this area. So this is a relatively small project, but something a little closer to Michigan. So I thought I would make sure I bring that one in. In terms of major urban corridor, the urban Mercer Corridor underpass, of course, you can see what does a green road look like? Well, it's definitely, there's a bike lane that's painted green. So I thought I'd offer this one just for a little tongue in cheek here, but this is a major infrastructure project. Of course, quite a bit different than the one we just saw, and this very small trail project at the beginning as well. Score for this one was silver, right on the line for version 1.5. A major design build project in Texas that's currently pursuing certification, started out as a pilot project and converted to certification. And then something also similar here in Indiana, which was a pilot project, which we rated for version 2 as well. Interstate 69, section 5 did a pilot project. So this sort of a little Midwest flavor to what it was. This would have been a bronze rated project if they choose to pursue certification. And then finally, just a taste of what maintenance looks like. This is one of my favorite projects. There's so many stories, I have to pick one each time, but one I usually go to is that this was the noisiest road in the state of California, and politicians were definitely hearing about it in more ways than one. So they ended up investing in a maintenance and rehabilitation project, which is a pretty major rehabilitation project, about 2 miles long. The project team, or the project was proposed to us by the maintenance division at the city of San Jose. And they said, we're doing this really cool thing. We're doing cold in place recycling. And what they had done was actually bid the project with an alternate bid. So they said we would have them remove and replace option versus the cold in place recycling method, where they take the first layer of pavement off, they crush it up and put it back down with a little bit of cement. And overall, this project saved 23% by using that method in terms of initial cost savings on a maintenance project. And in reality, what that is another half a mile that the city ended up saving that they can pave throughout the city somewhere else using that same method. So that was a really interesting project specifically because it's rare to get that type of detail on cost information, but understanding that each project is pretty sensitive to its cost and its budget. This is a major, major win on this one. And also dramatic savings, of course, on not transporting the material from site, not huge life cycle cost savings and life cycle savings overall. So well done, City of San Jose. All right, and I'm gonna stop, but I want to leave you with a couple of things that you can do, things that you can do. So definitely, if you're interested in sustainable transportation, or maybe are working in sustainable transportation today, we definitely recommend taking a look at the rating system online. It is currently free. It's a registration. We'd love to hear what you think about it and get your feedback. And we also have some free online learning, which includes not only this presentation, but some other things. And we're starting to build out our learning management system. So if you're interested, there's tons of case studies. You can find a project that's like yours. You can ask questions about it. We'd love to help you out. And definitely, if you think you're going to be working on a Greenroads project, nothing better than becoming a Greenroads STP. If you're in, what I find when I work with students is that everybody who's in classes right now is really good at taking online exams. And after working in practice and not being in school for many years, the exam becomes so hard. So that's mostly the feedback I get, is if you have the time thinking about becoming an STP now, those muscles that you use to make sure that you pass tests and study, those kind of go away after you don't need to take tests so much anymore. So it's something to think about. Definitely looking at becoming a Greenroads STP, we highly encourage it. It's a hard test, but we know you can do it as long as you, it's also open book, but not open neighbor, open book. So have a look at the website. I know Amlin's here and he can speak with you more about Greenroads. He's drank the Kool-Aid too, of course, but definitely getting the copy of the publication, coming to our events. We have some events coming up now, free forums that you can talk to some of our board members, called Is Rating Right for Me? So if you have some questions as an owner, today we actually had one for consultants. We have one for contractors, and we have one for owners coming up in the next couple of weeks. So those are free, open to public, and we'd love to have you there as well. So again, thank you so much to Brian and Amlin for helping me set this up today. I would love to hear if you have any questions, and you have me for the rest of the afternoon if you want to pick my brain about stuff. So, and I'm happy to give you a copy of this presentation too.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. Any other questions or comments for Jeralee?
Just one, and I'll try to keep it short. Fascinating talk, raises lots of interesting ideas. You know, a lot of transportation planning would be most effective, let's say, towards getting multiple modalities if it's done on a regional scale planning. And yet it looks like a lot of what you're talking about are individual projects. And I wonder what your process does to encourage that regional scale planning.
That's a great question. So we've seen a lot of agencies. You can always get me really excited about questions. So thank you for these questions. But there are what the answer for that one should be, and what we've seen are different things. So if you are a regional or network-wide planner, how can you use a rating system tool to deliver on those outcomes? And so one of the first pieces that you would need, we have had the opportunity, and we're grateful for this opportunity to have worked with a number of agencies that have done more than one project. But often what those types of, you need that one owner first to come in and say, here's what we did and here's your success story. If you're talking more about funding prioritization, you can use the rating system tool to get sort of a back of the napkin calculation. We have a free checklist online, and you could screen all of your projects. And if you had a tool like Greenroads and you have things that are specific alignment issues, like for example, say you have a stormwater target to meet, you can use a tool like Greenroads to measure how those sustainability goals that your agency has or your region has. You can actually use these tools to do that. Our agency is doing that right now. The answer is no. And I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got actually from Minnesota DOT was that it seems like there's a lot of siloing happening, especially at the DOT type level, where you may not be working with the people who are doing planning and actually building the project. So rating system is consistent regardless of when you start to think about sustainability. So that's kind of the nice thing about it. But if you're actually looking at prioritizing projects based on sustainability scores, then number one, the funding needs to be directed there. And you can do that by saying, well, we will fund projects that are, you'll prioritize projects that are registered for certification or something like that. Because you can say, well, we're going to be, it's similar to like a safety audit. You can require sustainability certification as a contingent on a delivery of a certification at the end of the day. We worked with a funding agency here in the state of Washington early on, a Transportation Improvement Board, who built in sustainability criteria that looks a lot like Greenroads into their funding criteria, so that they're already screening the projects for being selected for the work. And what we often saw was people were telling stories about sustainability, but they had nothing to show for it at the end of that whole process. And so those funds get issued without that tie back to what they actually did or that measurable outcome. So there's definitely a synergy between the rating system tool and the rating criteria that's used to select and prioritize projects for moving forward. So I would say that's definitely the nexus there. On the federal funding side, that same thing applies. So like an MPO could do those things as well, since most of those things are about prioritizing funding. You can use rating system tools. You can use a small portion of the rating system tool. You can use the whole tool in general. And an example from the New Zealand Transport Agency, they actually made requirements for, they did a full depth pilot program where they tested the rating system on 6 different projects to see that that was something they could use. Yep, they had some improvements to make. And then they set some goals and they made some requirements for their major projects. So you could set a cost threshold. Anything above $15 million in New Zealand was required to pursue and deliver a silver certification and show, which I thought was interesting. They actually had to make a business case not to do it. So in terms of understanding, what the actual approach would be, the teams would have to make an excuse not to do it versus just doing it in the first place. So it was harder for them to not show, to show that they couldn't do it. And I think that was interesting. But in general, they did set a specific target. And they said, all of our projects in our, over 15 million, over 100 are required to deliver silver certification. Between 15 and $100 million, they were required to show a business case that they couldn't do it. And then below 15, they weren't required to do it. I thought that was really interesting. City of Tacoma is very similar. They'll set a cost threshold of 5 million and above. And they also have a plan internally. I mean, Greenroads is not really, we're not a consultant, so they are doing this all on their own. They made goals to select one type of each of their projects to get certified, just to see what it would be. But they had the policy level goal before they pursued, they set the plan. And so policy level came down, and then the teams were starting to think about how they might go forward and actionalize that. And actually they still do Greenroads, even if it's under that $5 million threshold for projects that they find it to be a helpful communication tool with their public. City of Bellingham is a different example as well. So they've done many projects. They went to their policymakers. The policymakers made a amendment to the land use plan that in the comprehensive, the transportation component of their land use plan to set a threshold for certification. So on the planning side, there's a lot of, how do you use this tool? What are your goals? And a lot of that alignment up front, but definitely how you orient the goal setting and then the funding of the projects for prioritization is a huge deal. So you should be able to see outcomes, but you have to wait. I think that's the biggest piece, is you have to wait to see what happens.
Yep, great, thanks.
Jeralee, if I may add a quick rejoinder to that. I think, Noel, there are so many different, the sustainability of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, uses so many other different tools, life cycle assessment, life cycle costing, for prioritization of projects. Then you think about within a project itself, there are different practices, and you look at long-term performance when you're trying to prioritize. There's never enough money to do all the maintenance. So when you're trying to prioritize, you look at all these different factors. What Greenroads does very well is that at the project level, it helps you figure out that once you've decided to build that project, how much of the hard work have you done? What have you done? Have you done it well enough? And can we give you a gold star for what you've done? And so it really, and part of it is the way we are organized is, even though we make decisions on network level, a lot of the work, the construction itself gets done on a project level, and the prioritization is one project over another. And that, as Jeralee pointed out, happens at different levels, whether it's federal monies, whether it's state monies, whether it's local monies. And so the question is, what Greenroads does really well is it provides an interface across this systemic, many different systemic interactions, and reduces it down to a project and say, well, for this project, have you done it really well? Because if you've done it well for all these projects, then it all kind of adds up at the systemic
yeah.
well.
And so if you have a certified project, so what, right? So then you would say, okay, what did you learn from that, and how does it apply to your network? That's pretty common from where we've seen, is sort of that's the catalyst. Is you start with one project, and I'll kind of jump on what Amlin was saying here, is that, you know, the actual environmental impacts and the actual environmental impacts and actual social and economic impacts start dramatically when that ground is breaking. And that is so disconnected from this early prioritization and this decision to build the road in the first place, right? So but if you can connect, you know, the dots to that end certification, like as built, how did you do? And then what you do after that is a really meaningful conversation to have. I wish I could say I have thousands of projects, but it does take quite a bit of time. I think that's one of the nature of transportation projects in general. They take they're very expensive. They're a big lift. You know, in terms of, I have a great graphic here, which you can look at when I send you this presentation, but Engineering News Record, for example, uses this analogy of what the market looks like in the green building sector. And I think it's somewhere around $10.8 billion for education institution buildings. And that is pennies for transportation. There are 2 projects in the city of Seattle that are $4.5 billion each. So that's like the scale of just 2 projects, and they're not even on the map, right? So in order to get an Engineering News Record for your revenue tracked, if you're a contractor or a consultant, for that revenue to be tracked as green, you need to be participating in a third-party verification tool for transportation specifically. But if we started to do more than 2 projects, just in general, like some of these mega projects, we would blow the entire building sector out of the water. It is just a huge public asset. There's trillions of dollars, and there's so much potential in the whole sector. We just have to like organize, and I think the worst part is that you have to wait. Not only wait in traffic, but you have to wait, because it takes some time, and it takes a lot of project management and some really good communication within the team to deliver on these outcomes. And one of the other common complaints that we get is that environmental planning spends all this time saying these things are awesome, ecological connectivity is really important, and then somehow at the end of construction those things didn't happen like they intended, right? So there's definitely a disconnect somewhere, and a rating system tool provides that consistent thread and that's consistent goal throughout. So I would love to be able to tie everything together for everyone. It takes a village, I guess, on that other end of it, but yeah, I think we're getting there.
Well, good. Well, thanks again. I have to run, unfortunately.
Well, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
All right, any last questions before we go for Jeralee? All right, well, thanks everybody for coming and staying late, and thank you, Jeralee, again. I learned a ton today.
Oh, awesome.
I'm gonna go on the website and read more, and if we have any questions, we'll email you. So
awesome. Thank you so much. I
much,
really appreciate
Jeralee.
it. I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. Yep,
yeah,
bye.
you too. Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.